Hello hopeful friends, I'm Della Lavers from Quilt of Hope, Cornwall. It's time for March's prompt of Stitch With Me 2025, which I'm following along with Daniela Mellon. This month's prompt is postage. So I've already sewn a little tag and I'm going to make some fabric postage stamps out of some of these fabrics that have only got tiny little bits on, so I can focus and fussy cut these little emblems. I'm particularly pleased that on this one I have a pink one. And I'm going to use this fabric as a background because I have plenty of it. As you can see, there's plenty of margin. Now, something that I noticed last month when I came to actually sew all the way around the edge, I almost lost where I needed that line. And I had been laying out my template and drawing around it, which is absolutely fine. But on some of them, I know that I need to have them slightly over here or slightly over there to see what's underneath. Then I had the idea, if I created an aperture from some recycled card, using my current frame, all I need to do is draw around the edge and cut that out. Then I can use this almost like a fussy cutting template, so I can see exactly where I'm going. Here it is cut out. Now the idea is that if I'm placing things on my hexagon, for example this black cat, I might think I want it near the top, which I do at the moment. But when I sew my hem around the edge, I'm actually cutting it off. So now I know that I need to place my motifs within that frame. I've cut my motifs to an approximate size that I want, and I'm going to use heat and bond on the back of these to help stop fraying. Well then, who noticed my mistake? I've cut these a little bit too small because of course the Bondaweb needs to be smaller than the fabric because it's double-sided, and when you iron on it you don't want any paper sticking out, otherwise that'll stick to the mat. But there's always a solution, so I'm going to draw around the shapes I already have, and then I'll cut that slightly inside so that it's smaller than my fabric, and then press it on. So here's the first one cut out, just roughly. It's not stuck down yet, but it is the same size, so I'm just going to roughly make about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 centimetre, all the way round. All cut out. Textured side goes on the back of the fabric, and I've got my little trusty over 40-year-old travel line here, and I'm going to let that cool down before I cut it out. So these are now all ready to be cut out in the final shape that I want, and I can do it from this side. And in case you're wondering, yes, I have kept all the bits, of course. Sometimes you want to just hold a little piece of fabric down onto a background, and they're really useful for that. To use my pinking shears to cut round these. As I've told you before, I don't really like raw edges. This won't fray up. And although I'm going to put this on top of something else to give the appearance of a postage stamp, I might as well use the pretty scissors. They're all cut out, And yes, I am going to save all these little bits and bobs because I have a plan for these at the end of this project. So you'll have to stick around till December for that. Now I'm going to use that pink gingham shirt fabric that I used last month for the surround. I want to be quite careful where I'm placing these because if possible I want the pink and white to be around the edge so it looks more like a stamp rather than the pink and pink. And that's the last one. In order for me to make these look more like stamps and to place this onto my background, I'm actually going to use Bondaweb again. This time I'm going to use it over the whole piece of fabric rather than individually, so that will be much easier. So I just need to cut it out roughly and remember to do it on the back. These are now ready to cut out so they look like stamps. Those are all done now and I think they look rather lovely. So they're just ready to put onto my background fabric, which you remember was this slightly darker pink raspberry ghosty fabric. And all I need to do once again is peel off that backing and then press it down. It's now the next day and it's beautifully sunny here in Cornwall, but it's quite windy, so apologies if you can hear the flapping of my extractor fan. Not a lot I can do about that. I've cut out my hexagon of my backing fabric and I've given it a quick press. Now you remember those little scraps of heat and bond that I had kept yesterday? Well, this is where they will come in useful. So I want to attach this to my back page first before I add my little stamps to it. So very easy. I can just place those around, use up all the little bits. So I haven't wasted any fresh heat and bond. A great way to recycle. So I have my vintage mini iron and I'm just going to press down over the paper side of that heat and bond. Doesn't take long, just a few seconds, and this will be plenty just to give me a guideline and keep it held down. That's all we need, and I'll let that cool down. So just the last piece left. It's all gone cool now and that's ready to turn over. So I think I'm going to work my way up for this, and then it will hopefully not have any ruffles in it. That's all cooled down, so now I'm ready to place my postage stamps, and this is where that aperture is going to be really useful. So I can put these in place. I'm going to have my postage in the middle, but I'll stitch that on. I think that's about right. A little bit more fiddling. And now I can just take them off one at a time. Remove the backing. I think I'm going to give that just a little press so it stays there. And they're all on. And I'm going to give them a final good press to make sure everything's down. It only needs about 5 or 6 seconds. Always remembering that it is press, not iron. It's always tempting to go over and over it, isn't it? It really doesn't need any more. And let that one cool. I could just do a simple stitch or not at all and say that's done. my plan for the future of this is to use some of my stash of beads. Now these have been collected over the years, and you may have noticed that there's some blue ones in here. It's reminded me, quite by accident, that for this year's Pinkoween, I do want to incorporate a little bit of blue because men get breast cancer too. All my makes of the Pinkoween Cornwall quilt and this fabric book are for October, Pinkoween. I think it would be nice to put a little blue heart on here somewhere. There's also some teeny weeny little blue hearts on there, so I can go back and add those to each page. Completely forgot I had them until I got my beads out, so I think that'll be really nice. Well, it's the next morning. I started to edit this video last night, and when I was watching it, I realised how many times I'd said the wrong word. I was actually using this Heat and Bond. I kept saying Bondaweb. Now you could use Bondaweb, of course, but this is what I used. So I had to edit my video quite a lot. Sorry about that. Although I've used it before, this was a big learning curve, and I did something I won't repeating. So this morning, I was going to put this away and thought, well, that'll do for now. I'll do some more bits and bobs on it later. And it was staring at me when I went to take a photograph to put on Daniela's Stitch With Me 2025 Facebook group. And I thought, no, I need to do a little something. So I got my thread out, my lovely gold Madeira thread. I thought, I'll just put that little blue button on. So I did that. Oh my goodness, it was such hard work. And the reason it was hard work was I'd used a layer of Heat and Bond on the motif. Then I used another layer on the background. And then randomly I'd used another layer to hold this hexagon down. It's not easy to stitch through, let me tell you that. Even though I wore my trusty Thumbelina, I've still managed to put a hole in my finger. At one point, I was actually having to push the needle by pressing down onto my table. So I won't be doing 3 layers again. All I can say is I'm glad I used Heat and Bond light and not anything heavier. But then it occurred to me, well, if I don't finish this now, I will never come back to it because it's such hard work. So instead of doing what I should have been doing this morning, I've spent an hour just putting a few little bits and pieces on. Did my button first, and then I had a little bit of gold thread left on my needle. So I added my postage tag with my gold thread, and I still had some left on my needle. And then I just slightly highlighted this little pale pink pumpkin. You probably hardly see it. And then I had the tiniest little bit of thread left. And you know me, hate waste. So I actually highlighted this little pussycat's whiskers, which I thought was cute. That was going to be it, but I thought, no, come on, let's get on with it. So remember I was looking at my beads yesterday, and I just felt this needed something else. So I used some Gutermann, what's that, 663, which is quite a pale pink. But I used it to use some of these pretty little beads. These are tiny seed beads, and they are tiny. I thought I had a fine needle, but quite often I had to put them aside and use a different bead because it was so fine. But I like this idea because the print already has bubbles on from this potion, and I just emphasised it a little bit. And those beads were, they may not show on camera, but they're exactly the same colour as the potion bottle. And by this time I was pretty fed up with my sore finger, but I thought, well, 4 down, 2 to go, or 5 down if you count the middle. So very simple, just a scrap of DMC embroidery floss there. And then finally, I thought, right, I'm on the home run now. So I have some black Madeira metallic, which is beautiful. So I just did Mr. Spider's eyes. Now you can probably hardly see them, but they're 3D and there's a little bit of sparkle. I know it's there. So I'm going to call that one done. And I won't be doing that again. I'm looking forward to next month's prompt and I shall see you then. Meanwhile, stay hopeful. Bye.